The Hollywood strike might be about to get much, much worse for the studios. Welcome to Sidetrack, your sci-fi TV movie channel. So, last week, the DGA, or the Directors Guild of America, actually struck an agreement with the studios. This was considered a big coup for the studios as they continue to argue with the writers who are currently on strike and hoping to nip a strike from the actors in the bud as well, who started negotiations just last week. The Actors Guild, by the way, have already a massive majority have voted that if a deal isn't struck with the studios over the next few weeks, that they too will be going on strike. But the studios looked like they'd avoided a strike from the directors. Now, this had a couple of connotations because basically, on one level, it gave a blueprint for the other guilds, for the writers' guilds, the actors' guilds, to sort of say, look, this is what we're giving the directors. Are you really going to ask for more? Come on, let's beat out a deal, something around this. It really did take the legs out from under the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild in their negotiations, because all of a sudden the studios could come back and say, look, the directors are all right. They're happy. Why aren't you? Now, I did actually argue at the time when this news for the DGA agreement came in, because we were actually live at the time, that the problem that the studios have is that the issues the writers and the directors have are very different. The directors got a nice new cut of money, they had a deal with the residuals, etc., and they were reasonably happy, or at very least, the team negotiating were, but I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The problem is the writers have a very different problem. One of them being AI, which we'll talk about in a second, and one of them being the contracts that they're being forced to work to. Now, over in the United States, they currently have an agreement between all of these guilds, the actors, the writers, the directors, etc., and the studios. And part of that agreement is that they have agreed a scale, a minimum wage. When you hear actors saying, oh, I'm just working for scale, it basically means they're working to this minimum wage. Now, the writers desperately want this bumped up. The actors and the directors do too. But also, a lot of writers are being forced to do these sort of like basically 0-hour contracts where they work for a late night comedy show or something else and they get paid basically by the hour. Now, they're saying that, look, either employ me to do the job or don't. But what a lot of writers are being forced to do is basically being paid by the hour and then they can just be kicked tomorrow. Now, let's be honest, none of us would work in those circumstances. So we can, I think, understand why they're not very happy about it. Another problem the writers have, though, that the directors really don't have, and actually apparently a lot of the directors have basically said, look, this is a problem for tomorrow. We're not really interested in this right now, is AI. Now, we're seeing a lot more artificial intelligence being used. You know, it was a gimmick initially, but now it's actually being used to write material. And what the writers are saying is, look, the way AI works is, and I'm going to use the Stargate example here, that when Brad Wright created a new Stargate SG-1 script using AI that he then read out with some of the actors on the companion app. What he did was he fed a load of scripts from SG-1 into the algorithm and it spat out what it calls an AI-generated new script. Now, what the writers are saying is, wait a second, that's my work that's gone into that. It's rejigged it and done some clever rewording or whatever, but surely that story is kind of based on what I wrote. Isn't that copyright? Now, I'm a little bit torn on this problem. I do actually have some sympathy for the studios here because legally, I don't know how you answer this problem. Now, what the directors basically agreed is that AI cannot be used as a person. Now, that should really be common sense, but it can't. So what they're saying is the studios cannot use AI to generate anything that, you know, could be classed as a director's work. Now, for me, I would just say the writers need to do the same. And they need to say, basically, you cannot use AI to generate scripts. Done. Now, that should be straightforward, but there are some legal implications to that, and including sort of copyright law that make it a little bit complicated. The residuals, though, are really a big problem. This is a problem that directors have and the writers. And a lot of the problem comes from the streaming services. Netflix notoriously does not like sharing information about viewing figures. They're really, really bad at it. They don't like doing it, and they get out of it as much as they possibly can. The problem is a lot of the pay for the writers is based on that thing called residuals, how often something they wrote actually gets watched, royalties, if you like. The deal that they currently have for residuals is basically the streaming service just tells them, honest, this is how much it was watched, and they get paid. The writers are saying, we want way more transparency. We want to actually see the numbers that you keep refusing to show. Again, if you were in this situation, I would argue that you would not go to work and your boss comes to you and says, oh, you got your bonus this week, but it's only £3. And next week it's going to be £300. And you say, why? And they just go, don't you worry about it. Just trust me. It's £3 this week and £300 next week. You wouldn't go for it. You'd be annoyed and you'd want him to explain why you get so much one week and nothing the next. So these are the big problems that the Writers Guild have, and they can't seem to have an agreement. There are also some rumors to suggest actually that the Writers Guild, etc., are negotiating with people like Netflix, but Netflix isn't actually an agreed sort of member or a unionized member of the guild. So there is some problems there when the negotiating comes, because they're kind of negotiating with people that shouldn't really legally be negotiated with. But that has come from a source that really is trying to understand this problem, and they've had to reiterate to me repeatedly they're not 100% convinced that is the case, but that's what they're being told. But to get to the nub of why this problem might get much, much worse. So the directors, their team that negotiate with studios, have this agreement. The problem is it then needs to go back to the Directors Guild to be ratified. So they need to vote again to say, yes, we agree with this deal that's been so far agreed. The problem is we're hearing, and this source is a very close friend of the channel and really, really involved in what's going on over there, is saying they're hearing voices that people are voting no. Big names are voting no. I've spoken to one person in particular that is a member of the Directors Guild, and they said, look, I don't care what deal they've come up with. Until they get a deal or something working with the writers, or at least start trying to come up with a deal that compromises with the writers, I will vote no. They are voting in solidarity with the writers. I actually think the actors are doing exactly the same at the moment, where there's something 97% or something voted that they will strike if a deal isn't done. The studios are in a real problem right now because they thought they'd got a big coup with getting the directors on board. They thought that was their way in. But now it looks like, even though they might have got some sort of deal with the people there from the Directors Guild, the people there actually negotiating, but the problem is the actual people that matter, the members of the guild, are going to say no. Now, this may just be a loud minority shouting, no, no, no. And actually, maybe it'll go the other way. But at the moment, it's looking like the directors might not have a deal. And if they don't, then the studios really do have nothing. And they really are going to have to try to think of something to resolve this problem. Why is this taking so long, though? A lot of streaming services and a lot of studios are under massive financial problems right now. We keep talking about this on this channel. Paramount, massive debt. Amazon actually have some serious financial issues because they overexpanded during the COVID crisis. And then when things went back to normal, they all of a sudden went, oh, what? People aren't just sat at home buying stuff off our website anymore. That doesn't make sense. Disney Plus is losing hundreds of millions of dollars every week. These companies are having to restructure, and the last thing in the world they want to do is agree to having to pay the writers, the directors, and the actors significantly higher wages. It is the wrong time for them. Now, I say boo-hoo, but there is a serious issue here that they need to compromise something that makes sense for both. Because what you can't do is for Disney to say, yeah, okay, we'll pay you a bit more, but then Legendary Pictures goes out of business because they can't afford to pay the agreement. So there needs to be a compromise that works for everybody. Yes, writers need to be able to make a living. Actors and directors do too. Because remembering, we're not talking about the writers and the directors and the actors that you know their name. You're talking about the 95% of the others that you don't. These people need to be able to make a living because we want that entertainment. Guys, I'd love to know what you think. They'll get in the comments and tell me, is this a fight that they need to win? Because at the end of the day, people need to be able to feed their kids and pay their bills, right? Does there need to be a compromise that does work for everybody here? I'd love to know exactly what you think, so get in the comments. If you are new to the channel, like, subscribe, you know what to do. So you never miss any of our new videos. Make sure you hit that bell. Also, you can go to patreon.com/sidetrack, where most of our new videos air first, and you get to see them without the adverts. As always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.